Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Mercer, one of the founders of Backgammon Winning Women. And tonight it's book club. um, and I just want to say before we get started that I've tried to read backgammon books. I'm an intermediate player. I'll probably always be one. I've tried to read backgammon books, and it's really hard for me to translate the written word into the actual position and how to execute it. So then when Joe, who's nodding his head, Joe can wave, hello. When Joe said he was willing to come through and start to do some of these, I, of course, bought the book because I am somebody who does what they're supposed to, right? You guys, this book is readable and translatable. And I got so excited that I bought 3 copies and I'm sending them to friends because if you're an intermediate player and maybe moving into advanced, then this book is for sure for you. But let me get started. And Karen, if you could just wave, our co-founder, who's did very well in the tournament last week. So you go, girl. But we're gonna try to do these once a month where we sort of go through the book and walk through some things. But I wanted to start on a couple of things because one of the things I read about you, Joe, Joe sort of decided he was put his mental acuity to the line, and he was going to learn how to be a really good player. And he picked, as I understand it, a number of books. I think there are 8 that I've seen that you picked. And what he does is he reads them over and over again. And I want to talk about that for 1 second. But I also want to say that when we interviewed Kara Schultz has a number of backgammon books around her house, and she'll pick them up and just read a few pages. So she doesn't sit down and read it like a novel, but she also takes notes, and she reads through the notes that she's taken from these books in her notebook before she plays. And she's skyrocketing to success too. So Joe, just start off and answer a couple of questions for us before we get into the fabulous book.
Of course.
How does it help you to read the same book over and over again?
I am a proponent of a study method that, whether you're studying backgammon or when I was in law school studying for law school, you have to read things over and over in order to understand it. And you have to do those in different areas, in different places, because if you do the same, if you're constantly reading a book or a magazine in the same area, in the same place over and over again, things become jumbled. But if you are able to read something and then read it again in a different area, just in a different study place, you will associate the study place with what you read, and you can have a connection. Oh, I remember that because I was looking at it here. And by diversifying how you study, and for me, that's reading something 3-4 times in different areas, right? You will be able to internalize the material much more by having a recall of where you were when you read something.
Interesting. Also interesting, Harvard just put out a study, which I was talking to Karen about when we were speaking last week about this topic. Basically what they're saying is everybody's moved to audiobooks, and unfortunately, continually listening to the written word in an audio way, the retention is much diminished. And basically what the new data is suggesting is that you need to read it, and you need to read it more than once, and writing it down, physically writing it down, not typing it into your notes. Physically writing it down actually enhances your ability to retain it too. So I think we have to go back to our days in junior high school and high school and how we used to study back then. But it's very interesting what you're saying because you're mirroring what the new data is suggesting.
I'm a big believer in that. And when I was in law school, this was 15 to 18 years ago, I guess now, computers were beginning to infiltrate classrooms, and people would take notes, and I was on their computers, and I was literally the only person in the class that still took notes by hand. Partly because, one, I thought it was better and I would learn better. and two, because I didn't trust myself not to have my computer open reading ESPN.com while the professor's talking. So, but I thought, writing, reading and actually writing, I think that's a huge way to learn. It really helps, and I'm a big believer in those types of studies, and I've seen those studies, and I try to use the data points from those studies to help me improve. I have read the books over and over, and I'm trying to, although I'm not as good at it as I need to be, trying to write down items from the books in a little notepad. Another way that I do this is I take lessons and with Steve Sachs, one of America's best players, Grandmaster Steve, and I take notes. I have an app that I use, and I take notes on it. Now it's not handwritten, unfortunately, but I am typing out the notes, and I am referring back to those notes, when I ride the subway to work, or I'm on an airplane, or I do go back and reference those notes. So it's not just discussing the positions with Steve. It's also making sure that I'm taking the notes and internalizing it and being able to review it later.
Okay, well, tonight we're going to be talking about Walter Trice's Backgammon Boot Camp. And again, I can't recommend it more highly in terms of being able to translate it to actual action. Can you just answer a little bit about Walter Trice? Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Died too young, according to you, right? So what can you tell us about him so we know his background as you start to talk about his theories?
Well, I've read his books, and I think his writing style. I never met Walter, unfortunately, but I think his writing style is one that is engaging, and it has a sense of humor to it and sarcasm that I appreciate, and I think the metaphors that he uses throughout the book is something that is memorable, and I think useful to people as we all try to climb from intermediate to master to grandmaster.
That's true. He talks about Barclay Cook's book, The Cruelest Game, where every single chapter opened with a quote about war, because which I thought was fascinating, where he felt that the backgammon is war, and then there's the offense and the defense, and it's just going back and forth. And well, I've always wondered if maybe our world
it's working here now.
I
take this out, it won't work.
Dennis, we hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, Dennis, you need to mute yourself. Everybody should mute themselves, please. But anyway, I've always believed that if we stop teaching history war to war to war, we might have a better world if we taught it from a more sociological point of view. But I love the concept of teaching backgammon war to war to war, and I had never heard of that book. So he references a lot of people. So part of the book is it's entertaining, it's engaging, and it's educational. So you don't feel like you're reading this this dry thing where it's like memorizing, an object at rest tends to remain at rest, in the eighth grade. So I love that part about it. Were there any parts in the book that sort of moved you that way? I mean,
totally. So you referenced the war references, and for me, one of the key references that I remember in this book is that backgammon is like a roller derby. And if we all remember roller derby, when you're ahead in the roller derby, what do? You want to keep going around in the circle, right? And you don't want anyone to impede your progress while you're ahead, right? And when you're losing in the roller derby, if we all, I was not alive then, but I know it was big in the 70s, I think, right? That when you're behind in the roller derby, what do you try to do? You try to create as much chaos as you can and impede and block the other the other side from continuing their lead, right? So that was one of the metaphors that really stuck with me as I started to really study the game, is that it is like a roller derby. When you're ahead, you should be trying to create situations that make your game easier to continue moving around the oval unimpeded. And when you're behind, you want to set up as many barriers as possible so that the other side can, so that you can impede the other side maintaining their lead.
Right. So I think we'll go ahead and get started if you're ready. Are you ready to rock and roll with this?
Sure.
So Joe, you can introduce, you picked some positions and things to talk esoterically about the strategy behind it. Do you want to take it from here?
Oh, sure. We can. Well, first, before we get to some of the photos, and they're just, we're not using right at this point some XG files. We're just using some of the positions straight from the book, and I want to think about them in a very generic kind of fashion, so that we can build some muscle memory as we go along the game. And I chose this section of the book because of a couple of reasons. First, it's in the beginning part of the game, and I would like to start with these sessions that we're going to do each month with positions from early in the game and strategy for early in the game. So that was one reason why I chose it. Another reason why I chose it is because it's so early in the game. It is something that will continually come up, and you will be able to use in the rest of your games as you go along. I know you were saying earlier how going over a certain position may never come up again, and it's not as helpful potentially to you. So I hope with this discussion, you will find that just learning these positions and the theory behind them will improve your game and all of your games going forward. In many of your games, these type of situations will come up, and you will be able to refer back to what you learned in this chapter. So those are two of the key reasons. And then I think last is, I think it's an area that you can tend to make a large mistake early on in the game. And if we can cut down on large mistakes, we will improve our game quickly. I still make sometimes 400 or 500 blunders on these types of cubes where it's early and you make a wrong judgment about how many checkers are in the area to keep attacking. But if you understand these positions, you will make less and less of them as you go along. So with that, let's just take a look at the first one if we can. So this first position arose right after White had played an opening 4-3 and split from the 24 to the 20 point and brought a man down from the midpoint to the 10 point. On the picture, it says 15, right? So that's how this first position arose. Okay, it's 2 rolls in essentially. And then Black responded with a 3-3 roll and made the point on the head of White on the 5 point and made the additional point on the 3. Just from this position, okay, this is a double and a take, and it's basically almost 900 to 950 worth of equity, depending on how many rollouts you do, etc. Okay, it's roughly that much of equity. So you are essentially very close to passing as White just from this position. Okay. So if you remember okay, that the second roll of the game, if you're on the bar and your opponent has made the 5-point and the 3-point, so has a 3-point board with only 8 checkers down, right? So if you look at black, black has 2 on the 3-point, 2 on the 5, 3 on the 6, and 1 on the 8. That makes it 8 checkers. Just by knowing that this is 925 worth of equity, right? You realize that immediately if black improves in any way, it's most likely to be a drop for white. And alternatively, if white improves, then you realize, well, it's probably a take. So if you can remember just from this early position that it's very close to a drop for white, you will improve your game as you come up across very similar positions going forward. And ways that let's just talk about ways that white or black can improve their positions, right? So if black has 5 men on the midpoint here. If you take 1 or 2 of those men and move them down to the 7 or the 8 or the 9 point, right, and do nothing else to the position, it should be apparent that white probably will have to pass a double. Okay? Just by moving 1 man down from the 13 point, I would think that would make it a pass. If you moved it from the 13 point to the 7 point to the bar point there, that would probably be a pass. Just by bringing 1 extra man down. Okay? So again, if you remember this position, bringing more men down will make it a pass. Another way that it could improve for black is by moving the men from the 24 point and splitting them. Just by splitting the checker on the 24 point from the 24 to the 23, it probably brings it, I would say, I'm not even checking this because it's more about the theory behind it, okay? Just by splitting the back checkers, you have improved black's position here. Now black has more numbers that can hit the other checker on the loose checker on the 15 or on the 10 point. Black has more numbers that will move all the way to make an anchor or move his checkers out to the outfield to safety, right? So again, just by knowing the initial position and how black can improve, it'll turn it into a pass. And finally, the other way that black can improve that is normal that will come up is to move the blot that white has on the 24 point, move it up to the 4 point or move it to the bar point. That brings the additional blot within range of black's checkers, which will make the position worse for white, and again will make it a pass if black doubles. Okay, so that's ways. Yeah.
Joe, this is Karen. Do you happen to have illustrations of those variations? It would help me a little bit if you went over it again, but
we can go over it, but the next few positions will go through that essentially.
Okay.
Some of the ways that it, so I just want to come up with the theories here before we move into the positions where Walter goes into the variations. So we will go into the variations, but I just wanted to think theoretically what would improve and what would help black and let's think now what would help white. So helping white would be here essentially lifting the blot on the 15 so that there's not an extra man to be hit. That could potentially be helpful to white. Another thing that would be super helpful to white would be if white has another made home board point. So if instead of 5 men on the 6 point.
Garage and let it finish off gassing.
White has the 5 point lead. So that would be massively helpful to white. All right, so let's now move on to 415. So what happened here? Anyone want to pipe in and see what happened? Any comments?
People can come off mute to.
Mhm.
Uh,
speak.
I have observations here.
Go ahead.
The back checkers are split.
Okay.
The white spot in the outfield, by the way, is not there anymore. And black has another builder. I guess you call it an active builder, one on the 11 point, but he's not
Mhm.
quite as active as he might be if he was on the 10 point. Those are the changes I see.
Right. So black improved in 2 ways, right? Splitting and having an extra man down from the 13 to the 11. Good observation. And white improved a little by moving the checker from the 10 point to the 8 point, right? There's no more blot to attack, right? So black improved in 2 ways and white improved in 1, right? So what do you think? This position is better or worse for black versus white?
Better.
It's better.
Better.
And right. So, and as Walter says, this one is close to a drop, and I think on rollouts it might even be a drop. So it moves the equity from 925-ish all the way past or right around 1, right? So you've moved your equity up just by splitting from 24 to 23 and moving down from 1311. You've now moved your equity from 925 to over a little bit over 1 or right around 1, just on those 2 things. And hope again, as you said, and I say tell me your name one more time.
Me?
Yes,
I'm Leslie Lockett.
Leslie. And just as Leslie said, she noticed that black improved in 2 areas and white improved in 1. And again, just by knowing our initial position, you can kind of gather, well, it can't be that far from a drop. And if you dropped, you would be very close to making the right decision here. All right,
Plus-
Leslie, is that, yeah, sure.
Plus says it's a pass and 0.037 pass.
It's very close, right? So again, it's just by knowing our initial position and being able to see, okay, where did black improve and where did white improve, okay, and try to weigh them against each other and see who's better off or worse off, it can help inform your decision. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Now let's move on to the next one if we can. All right, so what happened here? Anyone, someone else besides Leslie, anyone can see what happened here?
Mhm.
Anyone else want to pipe in?
Well, white made the 5 point.
Okay, white made the 5 point, which is, as we said earlier, is that is really, really big, right? White making the 5 point. Okay, and what else? Versus the initial position. So white made the 5 point and
No blot to pick up.
no blot. Okay, so that's 2 improvements and 1, I would say 1 improvement and 1 giant improvement, right? And black has 2 good improvements, right? Not great, but improvements, right? Where black has now split the checker in the back and black has brought the man down from the 13 to the 11, right? And so now we think of black having how many men down ready to attack? He's got 2 on the 3, 2 on the 5, 3 on the 6, and 1 on the 8 for 8. and then a man on the 11, which can't bear right on the 5, so we'll just call that a half one. So now black has 8.5 men, right, in the zone. And here, what do we think?
To take.
You would take this, right, Leslie? If black doubled, do you even think black should double you here?
No.
So
Well, I don't know if you
so-
should double me, but if you did, I would take based on my
Good.
5 point.
good. So having the 5 point is such a huge swing, okay, for white, that it moves the equity in this position all the way down to not even a double. It's like 500 worth of equity, and it's not even it's a no double. Okay, having the 5 point is so big that only a couple improvements for black of splitting and having an extra man on the 11. That is such a huge improvement for white that black does not even have a double here. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
I'm just wondering that if black's blot was not on the 11 but on the 10, would he then have a strong double or more?
I wouldn't say a strong double, but I would
More
say
strong.
it'd be closer to a double. My guess would be right on the borderline is what my guess would be. Okay, moving
You're
it up
right.
is kind of big, right? Because now it's bearing directly on the 4 point.
Right.
Okay, so which is really important, because if white comes in on the 4, you want to be able to attack close, on that. So but that's a really good question, and it moves it probably pretty close to being a double. Okay, so we got it, because now we have 9 men in the zone, right?
Yeah.
Instead of 8.5, I like to call it, right? Because we're not directly bearing down on the point, on the point that's open. Okay, but I want you to remember from this is that having the 5 point as a defender is really quite important. Okay, really quite important, and you should be careful about doubling as black when your opponent has the 5 point made and you only have 8 men or 8.5 men ready to attack. Okay, and again, but it all goes back to the first position that we looked at, and being able to say, okay, who improved and by how much, and then trying to just think about the double take decision based on that. And you don't have to know everything. You just have to know that one position, and then be able to say who got better and who got worse. Okay, now let's go to the last position we have here in this grouping. Okay, who can say what happened here?
Better position.
And we can kind of think of it versus the last position, because white's position didn't change that much, right? White still has the 5 point and no blot, right?
Right.
And I think one additional man was moved to, I'm just double checking it. One man was moved from the midpoint to the to the 6 point for white. But otherwise, that's the only thing that changed for white, right? So maybe I say white got a little bit better because white got another person in the zone. But what happened for black?
Black brought down very active builders.
Okay, so the builder moved from the 11 to the 9, okay, which we just learned moving from the 11 to the 10 improved your position by about 100 worth of equity. So moving from the 11 to the 9 improves you from 450 to 550, we'll call it, right? Because we just learned that moving from the 11 to the 10 was worth a little bit. Okay, then black also had what? Two
Right,
more
moved
men
to the
come down,
7.
right?
Yeah.
Seven point.
So black has a man from the 13 go down to the 7,
Mhm.
and black has a checker go from the 13 to the 8. So now how many checkers does black have in the zone?
11.
11.
11. And that's probably too many checkers for white to take, right? 11 here is, so I think of it this way. Every person, every checker that comes down from the midpoint is almost worth like 200 worth of equity.
Hmm.
So if you look at it, if we took a man from a checker from the 7 and brought it back to the 13, it would probably, whatever the position was at this level, it would take 200 off of it, and it would probably be a take. And if you brought another person back, it would lop off another 200 worth of equity. So every time you bring more checkers into the zone, it's really, really quite bad for white. And
Yeah.
11 checkers in the zone ready to attack, even having the 5 point is not enough, right? And so I know we've read recently, there's a lot of literature out about in the recent book by Mochi, that 8 people in the zone or 8 checkers in the zone is not enough to attack, but 10 is a really strong attack. So if we know that, 11 is a really, really strong attack. You can continue the fight going forward as black.
May
So
I ask-
again, yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
Very sorry to ask, and this is
No, don't be
Pretty
sorry
basic.
at all.
it's a very basic question because I don't understand when I look at the numbers, like from an XG rollout, and you're talking about 200s difference and 100. What does that look like? Like, can you say what that looks like?
So yeah, I that's a really good point. I don't really like talking about the equities because I don't want to confuse everyone. So I confuse myself when I talk about all the numbers. So I only bring it up in this respect because we know that the first position was about 925, and what we mean by that is what we mean by that is if a sorry, we'll just wait till someone mutes for a second. Okay. If a position is a pass, right? If it's 1.0 of equity, right? That means you should pass it, which means that you will lose more points by taking the cube and playing that game over and over again than you would by taking it and playing it out. Okay, so let's think of a last roll position, and this is the way I think of it. Okay, let's see if I can help you here.
Me voy a dedicar a pintar.
So let's think about the last roll.
Desde 2 años
Alright.
que no hice eso.
If you were to play a position, okay, and you can win, and we were going to play 100 games, okay, Leslie? All right, we're going to play 100 games, and we know that if we rolled this position out on the last roll, that you would win 74 times, and I would lose, and I would win 26 times, okay? And you doubled me, okay? Should I take that cube or should I not take that cube?
I know you're supposed to take with 25%.
But why?
Oh, God, I can't explain it. It has to do with how much you lose if you play it out. And
So let's think about let's think about 74 times 2. So if you what's 74 times 2 is what? $148. $148. You would win $148, and if I won 26 times, I would win 52. So 148 minus 52 is what? Less than 100, right?
yes,
Okay, so I would lose less than $100, right? Which means if you doubled me, I should take it, right? Because if I dropped every time, I would pay you 100. But if I took every time, I would only lose $96, right? Now, if you were to win 76 times and I was to lose 24 times, okay, you would win 76 times 2 which is 152, and I would win 24 times 2, which is 48, and so I would lose $104, right?
But
So
what does
I
it look
would-
like? What does it look like when you see it
Mhm.
in black and white? Is it like point, like, is it 1.48? Is it,
So that would be one
Alright.
point. Now the math is not my strong suit,
okay.
but that would be 1.04.
I'm so confused about that. I mean, I'm loving
Mhm.
your lesson. I love going over this. I just am not good at this equity part.
Yeah, well, the math is not my strongest suit either. So let's not even think about the math.
Okay.
Just think about if you know that the first position is close to being a drop, right? Close, but it is a take. Then you just need to think, did white improve and by how much? And did black improve by how much? And then go back to your initial thinking and your initial position and go, okay, if I know this one is close and black improved by a lot, then I know that it's now a drop, right?
So, right. So this becomes a reference position.
Correct. Yes, and that's why I'm going over it, because it's one of the first reference positions to learn for the doubling cube, because it happens on the second roll of the game. And so you'll be able to compare this position to many positions as you play, because it'll come up over and over and over again. And that's why I wanted to go over it with you.
Joe, if I could ask you to explain the zone, you talked about the original position we looked at had 8 black checkers in the zone, and now you have 11 black checkers in the zone. But technically, what is the zone?
So I think of the zone as where my checkers can directly bear on the next open points. So for me, in this case, the zone would be from the ace point all the way to the 10 point, because the 10 point can directly bear on the open 4 point. So that's the zone that I would talk about. If I have 11 checkers within that zone, or 10 checkers within the zone of as many as the highest open point, that to me is what I consider the zone. Does that make sense, Karen?
Yes. And the other point, although it may not be relevant here, I know when I play in Chouettes and I want to move a checker from the 11 to the 10 or the 11 to the 9, my teammates say, oh, but they can now hit us with a 4-5 or a 4-6. Whereas since I'm an optimist, I think, oh, you know, it's a builder for making the point or hitting them if they come in on the point. So just
what should we? So part of what you can think there is how strong is my opponent's board. So how bad is it to actually get hit? Right. So here the opponent only has a 2-point board. So you want to bring, and you have a 3-point board. So you can play aggressively to try to bring as many men into the zone with less fear of actually being hit. It would probably be less correct to move from the 11 to the 9 or the 11 to the 10 if your opponent had, you know, a 5-point board. It might be. I'm not exactly sure. It obviously will depend on a lot of different factors. But one of the key factors that I would be thinking about is how bad is it if I got hit?
So another question that comes up for me all the time is most of us play matches either on Heroes or Backgammon Galaxy or whatever. Okay, so what is the score of the match? I'm always worried to give up the cube so early in any game for a variety of reasons, especially if you're playing a 5 or 7 point match on a daily basis, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I read the chapter that you're going over a couple of times. Everybody should buy the book. We'll go show it again. But how does that affect your decision on the cube?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably best to start out with what would I do for in a money game? So what is the position? What do I think is the correct play at money? That's always, well, I say that now, but sometimes in the heat of the moment you forget, but you should always be thinking the first thing when you get a double when you're playing a match is what would I do for money? That should be the basis of where you start. So don't even think about the score first. Just think, what would you do for money first? Okay. Then you can look at the scoreboard and see again how you should change it. Your reference position is the money position. Then, well, did the score get better or worse for me? And then you can calibrate how far you want to move off of what the initial reference position of for money is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I always think first, what was it for money? Or at least I tell myself that's what I think. Whether in the heat of the moment I do that over the board, sometimes I slip up too. But it's that's my first thought. What would I do for money?
Mhm. Can I just say I've read Nick Blazer's new book, and it really helped me with this concept that was just brought up. The impact, there's huge impact on the score. I mean, you were right, for a cash, this is a double pass. And if you just turned it from black is 2 away and white is 4 away, it is a huge no double, 0.842. That just shows you how a cash game and a score can really differ.
Yeah,
and Nick Blazer's book has really helped me. And Karen and I talked in Novi, and we talked about you, Joe, and she said how we both heard you say at a previous meeting that you read books 3 times. So I've read Nick's twice, and I'm gonna read it the 3rd time soon.
And have you found that reading it again made you remember different things?
Absolutely. And I take a lot of notes like you do, and I listen to notes when I'm riding my bike.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you'll be able to pick up more things just from reading it again. You're like, did I even read that the first time? Because you're thinking of something else, or again, and the more times you read it, the more things that you'll remember from it. So I'm a big believer in that.
What is the name
Can't
of
just
that
read
book?
it once.
What is the name of Nick Blazer's book?
I'll get it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to show this book too. And Backgammon Boot Camp, Walter Trice, and we will send out the link where you can go to order it. And again, I give it 4 stars. I understood the whole thing.
I think it's a great book, Christine, for anyone who's looking to move from intermediate on up. I really recommend it. I think it goes through all aspects of the game. It's not just focused on one area. So it'll go over cubes, it'll go over bearing off, it'll go over opening play, it'll go over middle game. So it goes through everything. So I think it's a really great
You might
book.
not see it on the New York Times nonfiction
Yeah,
bestselling list,
so
but
it's
up there.
adjusting to match play.
Who's that
Oh,
book by?
you had it
Adjusting to
up.
match play. Who's that by?
Nick Blazer. Nick Blazer.
Spell that last name, please.
Nick
It's
Glazer.
a great. I think it. I actually need to read that one, and I think it's probably a great book for those who are trying to take their game to the next level in match play. If you're looking to, so it's really, as the book title is, it's meant for the match play, whereas the Backgammon Boot Camp is more of a general overview of the game.
Well, thank you, Joe. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a comment. My comment is I love this program
Mhm.
and what was done here tonight. Very helpful, very helpful.
So
Well,
what-
I appreciate that. Thank you for your being engaged, and you know, it really, I think it makes it better to have you guys engaged and chatting with me. It's not just about me; it's about us answering questions and trying to help each other.
And I
Thank
also
you,
will
Jane.
say Joe had to spend an extra night because his flight was canceled to be able to do this tonight. So thank you for that extended stay in Florida to do this. Karen, do you have anything you want to say wrapping up?
Well, I appreciate everybody who came and people who made comments, and give us any feedback for what you would like to have as the next book on the book club, or how we can make this a better experience for you. I would note that we're very fortunate to have Blue Shoe and my co-founder, Christine Mercer, staffing this, but this will be made, am I right, Christine, into a YouTube video, and that will be posted on the Backgammon Winning Women YouTube channel in a few days. Am I right about that, Christine?
Yes, it'll be up in a few days, and that's where we get the bulk of the people watching. But in addition to that, we'll be putting it out on our social media with a link, as well as in our newsletter, so you can watch it 3 times and you can write things down.
I should never have said that.
Okay, all right, everybody have a great night.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
This is valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.